Hello everyone, welcome back. Now, in this video, I will just briefly talk about Terraform. What is Terraform? Why do we really use Terraform? What is the need of infrastructure as code? And probably show a small demo of what Terraform really does. So, before starting the video, let me introduce myself. I'm Sushil. I'm a certified cloud and DevOps expert, and I have a bunch of other certifications as well. I'm passionate about fitness and technology, and I share my knowledge using the techguy.in. That is the blog where I write. Now, before starting with Terraform, I want to introduce you with the concept of infrastructure as code. If you have seen my previous video where I talked about DevOps life cycle, infrastructure as code is really a fundamental thing or fundamental concept when we talk about DevOps. Why? Because it helps you automate your infrastructure deployment. Now, what does really mean? What do we really mean when we talk about infrastructure as code? This is actually what infrastructure as code really is. You write code, you write scripts, which basically automates your infrastructure deployment. Now it can be scripts, it can be template, policy, whatever you want. You use some sort of version control, which can be Git or if anything else, but obviously almost everyone uses Git, and you use those scripts to deploy your infrastructure. Now there are a bunch of infrastructure as code tools. There is Terraform, there is Ansible, Chef, Puppet, AWS CloudFormation. In Azure you have Bicep, you have ARM templates. You can use any of these, but there are different purpose of Terraform. There is a different purpose of Ansible, Chef, and Puppet. Terraform is purely for provisioning your infrastructure. When I say provisioning your infrastructure, you can use Terraform to create your resources. It can be, so Terraform is platform agnostic. It is really independent. Terraform kind of supports almost all the environments you can think of. Terraform supports cloud, Terraform supports on-premises, Kubernetes, virtual machines, VMware, Hyper-V, anything you name it, Terraform supports it. But Ansible, Chef, and Puppet, you can use it in a way to deploy your infrastructure. But Ansible, Chef, and Puppet are really used to provision your infrastructure, probably to install something on your infrastructure, or to modify or to implement something on your infrastructure. Terraform can in a way do it using provisioners, but really the core concept of Terraform is to, or in fact CloudFormation or Bicep or ARM templates is to create your resources or create your infrastructure. That is the whole funda of infrastructure as code. I'll show in the lab how it is really done, but that is what infrastructure as code means. Now, why do we really use infrastructure as code? First of all, it enables automation. You can really write code and you can deploy it using your pipelines or using the manual stuff. But if you're really automating, what's the logic of running this manually? You can really use pipelines to automate the entire deployment. You can automate it. And now if I mentioned there is some sort of version control which you will also use, so there is consistency and you really know what is really happening. Then you also have something called states, or state file, which is usually stored in some sort of backend, which really tells you what really happened when you deployed that code. Now it enables consistency also, and what else? That these are the main concepts, and it really enables collaboration also, because you can, multiple people can be writing in the same or working on the same infrastructure. Now let's assume you know, in your team you are 2 members, just to keep it simple. You are deploying something and your team member is also deploying in the same infrastructure. Now you don't want, first of all, to have a conflict. If you deploy something, your team member should not delete it, or if you're deploying something, your team member should not really try to deploy the same thing. So that is where state file and consistency and collaboration, it really enables or enhances the overall collaboration. Now, Terraform uses something called HashiCorp configuration language, HCL, to define your infrastructure. That is the whole concept of infrastructure as code and why we really use infrastructure as code. Now, why Terraform? Why not anything else? Right? There is AWS CloudFormation, there is Bicep, there is ARM templates, there is Ansible in a way, but I won't really compare Terraform with Ansible. I'll really compare Terraform with AWS CloudFormation or Bicep or ARM templates. Why? Because Terraform is, as I mentioned, it is not really dependent on any platform. It can be used to deploy almost anything you can think of. You can deploy it on, you can deploy your virtual machines, you can deploy your Kubernetes clusters, you can deploy your AWS, Azure, GCP, IBM, Oracle, any cloud provider, infrastructure, anything. So Terraform, you can version your infrastructure. As I mentioned, there can be multiple team members. You are making some changes, the other team member is making any changes. So how do we really make it consistent? It enables version control. It enables you to track your changes, which I'll probably show in the next lab. Enables collaboration. It helps you track the history of your infrastructure, and you really have a large and active community. When I say this, you really have very good documentation. You can almost find anything on Terraform documentation. If you're really starting with the Terraform, you really do not need to remember or memorize anything. You can just Google it, and Terraform documentation will really tell you what you need to know. And there are a lot of resources and plugins for Terraform. Now the basic, how do you really install Terraform? I'll show you. But the fundamental thing, as I mentioned, it uses HCL. The file extension is .tf. .tf is something that you use, and you also use TFRs. Not mandatory. TFRs is not mandatory, but there is no point of not using TFRs, because as I mentioned, you really want to automate everything. When I say automate, you really want to use pipelines, right? When you use pipelines, if you are aware of any scripting language, any coding language, you know what variables is. So you define your variables, and obviously those variables need inputs also. Now, if as a code, those inputs can be passed on when the code is really running, or you can really automate it. So TFMARS really automates all those variable inputs. You can define those variables, not define, you can actually define, you can really pass the value of these variables in TFVARs, and when you run it, it will read TFVARs and it will find out what the value of the variables are. Now the best practice of writing Terraform or creating Terraform is to create, you can just have, practically you can just have one file, and in one file you can have entire code, but that is not readable, that is not manageable. The best practice is to use multiple files, not even like this, but this is the core, this is the bare minimum that you should have. At least have main file in which you define all your resources, then have variable file in which you define all the variables, and TFRs, as I already mentioned. Now, provisioning infrastructure, what we do as part of Terraform. Now, as I mentioned, Terraform is really infrastructure as code. You write your infrastructure. Now, Terraform, as I mentioned, Terraform is really platform agnostic. You can use Terraform to deploy any platform. Now, how does it know that you've written your code for Kubernetes, or you've written your code for AWS, or for GCP, or for Azure, or for anything else, for example, for VMware? That is where you initialize, you run Terraform in it. You define those providers in your script, you initialize. When you initialize, it reads those provider configuration, which I'll show you in a couple of minutes. It goes through those provider configuration, and it figures out that these are the providers that you wanted to download and configure, and this is what you're going to use. So you initialize it. If there is any issues during initialization, you can rectify and you can run the Terraform init again. Now, when you run Terraform init, then you run plan again, not a mandatory step, but highly recommended if you are a beginner. But in any case, Terraform plan is really highly recommended, because Terraform plan really tells you what it is really going to do, what resources it is going to deploy, what changes it is going to make. So Terraform plan is what will tell you. You can go through that plan, you can ensure that it is doing what you are really expecting it to do, and then you can run your Terraform apply. Terraform apply will create those changes, those plans, and then your resources will be deployed. That is overall the workflow when we talk about Terraform creation or deployment. Now, how do you really install Terraform? I'll show you first with the Linux. Now let's assume now this is a Windows, this is a Linux machine. You can really Google, and the documentation will really tell you, the documentation will really tell you how do you install it. You can just Google, and I can Google install Terraform, and you will find the document. It tells you how you install for all the environments. Windows, it's pretty simple. You can just download it. For Linux, there is only basically 3 lines. First, it gets the key using wget. It gets the key. Second, it adds the repository for the environment or for the version it is doing. It adds the repository in apt, and then you install Terraform. That's it. And in Windows, you can download. Now in this, what I did is I just created my script like this. I just copied those things, and you can run it, and it will install Terraform. Okay. Now while this is happening, I will show you how you do it for Windows also. Now Windows, I told you you can download this, and you can move it in any directory, right? I can go to C drive, and I created a Terraform folder where I created my or copied my directory. Now if you are at least fundamentally aware of how all this command and executable works, ideally if you see, I'm in my C drive drivers, and I do not really have my Terraform executable. But if I run Terraform, I mean, when you're running any application, right, you really want to run it from anywhere. Because let's assume you created your scripts, you wrote your scripts in C drive ABC folder, and it can be really relative path, and you don't really want to every time copy the Terraform in that folder. What you can do is you can go to your system settings, and you can go to advanced system settings, and then you can go to your environment variables. In environment variables, you can the path, I'll tell what path is, but you can just create a new path and just mention the folder where you moved your Terraform. Now what is the path? When I'm running anything in my command prompt, now for example I'm running abc.exe, I'm just giving a random example. What it will do is, first of all, it will try to find this abc.exe in my present working directory, which is C drive drivers. But if it really doesn't find it, then it will try to find it in all of the locations specified in my path directory. So I've moved my C drive Terraform. Now whenever I run, for example, I do Terraform -help, I can run it from anywhere in my for anytime or anywhere in my terminal. So that is what you do. That is how you configure your Terraform in your Windows. And if you see Linux, I think it is already installed. It is taking time. It is I'll figure out later, but yeah, it is done, and that is how you install your Terraform. Now I want to show you a very basic Terraform script, how you create Terraform. Now Terraform, if you see, first of all, I mentioned it can be used for almost anything. When I say almost anything, you have a lot of providers. I can go to my providers, and I can see a lot of providers available, or I can just Google, let's Google Terraform providers. Okay, and you see the list of providers. You can see the list of providers that Terraform supports. Terraform, let's do this. Terraform providers list. Nowadays, I've seen the first search is never Terraform official site. It should really be Terraform official site, but I don't want to waste your time. But yes, you can see it in the Terraform. Or let's do this. I don't really prefer third-party links, but Terraform provider, you can just check the online documentation, and you will see what all providers are there. Now, when we talk about Terraform scripts, First of all, we mentioned what all providers. Now you can use same script for multiple providers. For example, you are deploying something on Azure, you're also deploying something on AWS and GCP and Kubernetes, for example. So I can define what all are my required providers, and then I configure my provider. So first of all, I tell what are required providers, what is my provider version, and once I tell my provider version, I then configure my provider, and then I specify what resource I want. I'm just creating a bare simple resource group. I tell that this is a resource. You can have data, you can have variable, you can have local, you can have a lot of things. So this particular thing tells what kind of what block you're using. I am using a resource block, which defines a resource is going to be created. What will be the resource? It is really a Azure RM resource group, and this is a relative path which will be used throughout my script. Now if I want to, for example, create my virtual machine, let's assume I want to create virtual machine, and the virtual machine will be created. Now let's assume I do this, not resource group, and I use virtual machine, just giving a random example, and VM and this. Now and I want to use my VM name test VM, and I want to use location as the same location as my resource group. So I can really use Azure rm.rg dot location, so it will be created in the same location as my resource group, right? So this is just a relative name which can be used anywhere in my script. So I am creating a resource group. I'm creating a resource group with the name Terraform RG, and the location will be West Europe. Now, if you check my portal, now let me show you my portal. And if you check my portal and I go to resource groups, you'll not really see the Terraform RG resource group, right? You don't really see Terraform RG resource group. This is VNet. This is not a resource group, right? I mean, this is a resource group, but not the Terraform RG resource group. Now, as I mentioned, first of all, you run Terraform init, and you run Terraform init, which I've already done it, but just to show you what it does is Terraform init, as it checks the backend. It's again the whole lot other concept which I'll probably talk about somewhere else. But when you run Terraform init, it creates a Terraform directory where it downloads my providers, and in the provider it downloads the provider that are required, right? For example, if you see, let me open this. Okay, it really downloads those providers, Azure RM provider version 3.0.0, because this is what I mentioned. If there were other providers mentioned, it will download and configure those providers, and if there are modules, it will create those modules and everything. Now, once this is done, I can use Terraform plan, which will tell me what it is really going to do. Let's give it a minute. So this has come back, and if you see, it tells me, I mean, this plus shows create, and there will be minus if it is going to destroy something, and there will be tint if it tilde if it is going to change anything. So it tells me what resource will be created. A resource ID obviously will be created after it is deployed. My location will be West Europe, and name will be Terraform RG. Now I can use, as I mentioned, next step will be Terraform apply, and I can just wait for it to give prompt, or I can just use auto approve so that it doesn't really ask me the verification before creating it. Give it a minute. So it came back, and you see Terraform, as I mentioned, a plan. If you're really confident, you can just ignore, because apply also gives you, it runs a plan first. It tells you what all it is going to do. It is going to add 1, 0 to change, 0 to destroy, and then it will start creating it. It will start creating it, and done. Now let's jump back on the portal and let's refresh. Let's go to home, let's go to resource group, and let's go to Terraform RG. Terraform RG created in the West Europe location. Perfect. So Okay, so in this video, I talked about infrastructure as code. What is really infrastructure as code? I gave a little intro about Terraform, why we use Terraform, how do you install Terraform, and a quick lab where I told you about Terraform init, plan, apply the normal Terraform um, life cycle, or not life cycle. I told you about Terraform process and deployed a small resource group in Azure. I hope this video helped. If there is anything else that you want to cover, please let me know in your comment section. But everything else, feel free to comment. And thank you so much. Have a good day.